Hi, everybody. I'm Coach Jake with Sports Backers Marathon Training Team. I'm one of the overall head coaches and the route guru or route master for the program. So all the routes that we provide to you usually come from my experience on the program and coordination with all different routes. This video is going to show you a simple kind of tutorial of how the programs that I use, or really just the websites that I use, to develop the routes, but also give you an idea of what they can and can't do so you can make your own routes. So let's just get to it. So generally, we're going to take a look at using Google Maps. Now, most people know about Google Maps. It's what we usually use for getting around traffic, finding restaurants, all that type of stuff. But the background is that there are two types of map companies. Generally, there's four, but otherwise the two that we're going to talk about are Google Maps, and then the other one is OpenStreetView. So in comparison, it's like we have Google Maps as a street simple map is showing us the type of information here, and OpenStreetMap has a bit more. OpenStreetMap is like Wikipedia, where it's open source and people can add and adjust and edit the information. It's pretty powerful and used by a lot of different programs online. But the biggest difference I want to point out, the reason why the Google Maps versus the OpenStreetView, is that this section right here of the parking lot that actually connects with Hermitage and Sherwood. If we look at it from an aerial view, we know that the parking lot actually connects. In reality, there's a road there. That's how cars can work. So obviously pedestrians can do that as well. So Google Maps has that connection of a road, but for whatever reason, OpenStreetView just does not. So there's a limitation to how I look at my options, because I'm looking at options of how to get the groups out of the stadium onto different routes. So with that in mind, there are a lot of programs online that are really nice and good, and you can do research on that use the OpenStreet mapping and have some nice features to them. But for my purposes, I need to stick with MapMyRun. MapMyRun uses Google Maps as the background for all of its maps, and it works 99% of, or I should say 95, 99% of what I need to do for most of these routes. I can do workarounds, and over time, the site has adjusted a little bit, so it doesn't, it's got some little goose that I know how to do workarounds, but this is what I use. And by all means, you can use any other mapping website, because most of all of them do the same functions, and this is generally just what ends up happening. For almost all the websites, you do want to do a profile, and that's not really a bad thing. There are some paid sites like Hello Drifter, Runkeeper, Strava. Runkeeper and Strava are more app-oriented. There's a lot of data that utilizes smart watches, things like that, and those are paid sites, and they do have mapping elements on there. But that's really if what level you want to do. If you're just doing a simple route and you just want to do something that you can follow along, then by all means use the free sites all about. So I'm going to show you a simple technique on doing some routes. Off the side here, we've got options where you can clear the map, recenter it, out and back, reverse, return. Generally speaking, I always set up to where we're going to do a walking, obviously we're going to run it, but otherwise follow the roads, and it wants to avoid the highways. And so there's, you can do as a bike or as a car. So there's different things that are available to that. Then you can also have different elevation information, some traffic, things like that. So there's a lot of niceties to the program. So for me, the biggest thing that is helpful is the fact that I do this in conjunction with Google Maps Street View. So if we go over to the map, we can see that the city's facilities have been demolished a couple of years ago, and so there's nothing here. But from the map standpoint, they think there's still some buildings. Not that big of a deal. The roads are really the key to what we want to do. But there are some elements that the aerial maps compare to based on the information that's available. So I know for a fact that there is a big construction that has been completed for a number of years here, and that the construction that was going on here is complete. The aerial shots don't necessarily show us that, but if we go to a street view, there's the building. Now, this view, again, like I said, I know the building is complete, but they're still under construction there, but this street view is technically from 2019. So it's nice to know that the street view sometimes can give us much more up-to-date information, because as we've probably heard from some people, that they think that Google View, satellite view, is a live view. It's not. It's obviously taken over time, and as like I said, this aerial shot's a couple years old. But I use it from a street view standpoint because certain roads are good to know where certain elements are going to be coming from, because I want an interesting run, but also want to know if there's possibly any obstacles or anything like that. So for example, I want to make sure that there's a street sign that's available to make sure that anything I call out is visible. Depending on which direction we're coming from, we've had some situations in the past where a tree has grown over the street sign, so that from the direction that the runners are getting there, they don't get a chance to see the street sign to know that they need to turn. But it's really nice to know where also with the street view is that depending on the day, you can see the shadows roughly. And so if we know we're going to have a hot run, since I run these routes as well, I want to make sure I have as much shade as possible. So I am literally looking for shade a lot of times on some of these street views to see if there's something that's available that will be a much more comfortable run than something that's out in the middle of nowhere that has no shade. So that I use that in conjunction with figuring out the routes. So as a simple route exercise, I'm going to show you how this particular program works. And with all the routes, I usually start at the same spot, just kind of the entrance to Avenue of Champions off the parking deck. And so if I'm going to do a route that utilizes different areas, I'd like to go out different pathways depending on which routes I need to do. So we have it set up towards following the roads. So with that, I can easily just click there, start, and then click, and then it immediately fills in the pathway. The nicety of it is that it becomes less clicks. I don't have to be too precise, but it does at least understand which side of the road that you're on. So in most cases, we are going to run against traffic, as we always should, versus bikes. Bikes will ride with traffic, and they follow the road signs like any other vehicle does. But we're running against traffic as much as possible. The times that we don't run against traffic or when we're on a one-way street, most of the times that is because it's a better road to get from point A to point B in a particular route, or in most cases, we are running on the roads that actually are part of the marathon course. And the marathon course has a number of one-way streets that we run in the direction that car traffic flows. But during that day of the marathon, we obviously don't have traffic coming up behind us. But when we're training runs, we need to show you the roads that you're going to be running on marathon day. And so that's why we run on some one-way streets that don't seem like they should be going that direction. So as this example continues on, I'm going to take a left up in Westwood. So I'm on Hermitage, and so it does a good thing of following the pathway across. Now, if I wanted to go further up, sometimes I get a little goofy pathway there, or get a goofy pathway there, or even crazier is that if I wanted to do that, it's a different little pathway. Sometimes we'll cross over, but otherwise it just follows the road. So we're going to take Westwood. Now, Westwood in this area is an on-ramp. We are over here. So Westwood has this off-ramp that continues on to Westwood on this road. So as a mapping program, as it is right now, where it's following the roads and it's avoiding the highways and I'm a pedestrian, if I want to go up that route, up that ramp and get to here, that's how it thinks it needs to do the route. So let's undo that. Let's see if we take away the highway. and it does the same thing. If we go ahead and just turn that back on, but undo, and then look at it from a bike standpoint, now for whatever reason, it understands that I can take the on-ramp to get onto Westwood and then do a U-turn to get to that point. But if I do it as a car, it for some reason takes the same pathway as what I did as a pedestrian. So there's some goofy elements here that you'll come across that sometimes you're just going to have to suck it up and kind of figure out a way around it. The way around it is that most of the softwares that are available, come on, will allow you to turn off follow the roads. And so when you do that, then you're creating your own little path. And this still calculates the distance and the elevation based on the GPS information, as you can see here. So then once you get back onto the main road, do follow the road. And even though it kind of jumps a little bit, it still understands the route as being complete. So we're going to just finish the route. We'll do something interesting here. And this is where I like to, some of the routes are more about seeing interesting spaces. So it's like we obviously run by a school park area and then also go down to Sandwich. So if we go to Google Maps to where that road is, we can have an idea of what we might see on that run. And so obviously based on the trees, this is sometime in the fall or even in the winter, but you can see it's a pretty nice, simple residential area. Doesn't look like there's going to be a lot of traffic to it. Some interesting houses, some pretty architecture, and then obviously, with some of the bigger trees and old growth and stuff, we're going to definitely have some shade. So there's some elements utilizing Street View that help me out in understanding what our routes might actually be. So we'll go back and finish the route. This is just a simple one just to show you how things work. And so there's our route. And so we've done a simple, easy 4.69 route. So we're just going to call this MTT test. We're going to classify as a run and save the route. So we see our route here. And so underneath our profile, we have a whole bunch of options that we can use. We can share this, we can post it to Facebook or email or whatever. One of the things that I find useful is that there's a download the GPX. I don't really work with the KML file, but the GPX is pretty universal amongst other route softwares online that you can plug and play and pass on the route. So if you're making a route and you download the GPX, you can do it that way. Your smartphones, or I'm sorry, smartphones that track you if you're doing a route, or if your Garmin watches or anything like that, they do, you can download the routes from there as a GPX file. Those GPX files will also have more time information that websites like Strava like to utilize from the standpoint of giving you additional data. So there's a lot of information you can have in a GPX file. So I'm going to call this one MTT test. GPX file. So then what I do is I go to run go. Now you'll see that run go, its map is a little bit different and doesn't really quite match up with the Google Maps. That's fine, because what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be creating a route, but we're going to be plugging in from our GPX file. So there's our file. We're going to open it. And it's going to load it into its own version of the route. And here we see that we got turns calling out. Now, if we go back to, say if we're going to edit the route, we can go back and see that we have a lot of directions and notes. Now, we could print that all out onto a sheet of paper and run with this, but heading northwest on Fitzhugh Avenue towards Antrim isn't really the easiest of things to do. We usually, like simple turns like left and right or go straight. So the nice thing about Run Go is that it does that for us, and Run Go is right now the more popular app that talks to you as you run. So what we can do is we can see the different terms. So as we zoom in, now if we're starting here, we know we're going through the parking lot, so we don't necessarily need these routes or these turns, so we can delete certain points. And even though it's jumping on some road that it doesn't really know, it does know that there's a turn there and that eventually it is a turn on to Hermitage. But when we get up to places like Westwood or something like that, where you might want to add some additional information, then I like to add a custom and then fill in there, run up. So as we're going along, the app will speak to you before getting to a certain point to tell you where to run or where to turn. And so the same thing happens with these custom points, whereas as you're getting close to it, it will actually read out, run up the ramp. And so I do review the routes as best as possible to make sure that the turn by turns that I print out and I provide to you guys are legible and understandable. But at the same time, though, I try to make sure that the run goes work as well, and that they're staying and keeping up with the turns as they should be based on the names. Now, what's interesting is that as a case in point, there's an example where this road used to be called Tradford, but depending on which program you look at, it's still being called Tradford, but it's actually now it's called Police Memorial Way. And in fact, it actually even has a little memorial for the police officers. So these are the things you come across with different maps and different backgrounds that can help you out. So with the Run Go, we've got that plugged in. So let's go up and call it MTT test and save it. And what allows us to do is that since that's there, we can go to our Run Go app, do a search for MTT test, and there's the route. So we click on the route, and then if we download it and then run it.
Running MTT test. Head north to the start. So, run pause. Run pause. Run stop.
Sorry about that, but you get the idea that a good volume on the run is going to be helpful for you to if there's any traffic around you, things like that. So hope this helps you guys understand where the routes come from, my thinking about making some routes. For you guys that are going to be making your own routes, either for yourself or for whatever small group that you might be in charge of making the routes for, you're going to know the roads that are around where you enjoy them, where they're interesting, and you also understand where most of the traffic will be. So I don't want to put you guys in any danger of anything, but also I want to show you some interesting spaces around Richmond. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Contact information is on the training manual. So hope you guys are ready for the training season and have fun running. And we'll see you soon.